Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Star's 10Forward event. We are live from Star locations across the world, and we're now ready to start the event. My name is Richard Windsor. I am the founder of Radio Free Mobile, which is an independent research provider specializing in the technology sector. I have the privilege to be moderating today's event. As a reminder to participants, you can ask questions in the dedicated right corner, or if you have any comments or queries, please feel free to use the chat box. We will be monitoring both. The event itself will cover the 10Forward universe and the many insights that have resulted from its creation. The event will start with an introduction to the 10Forward universe, and then follow up with in-depth industry sessions where Star experts and their guests will dig into some of the key insights from the FinTech, healthcare, and automotive and mobility reports. So today we are thrilled to announce the launch of Star's annual trend report, 10Forward. This is not your run-of-the-mill white paper, but a universe that Star has designed with two characteristics front and center, which are experience and expertise. And you'll hear us perhaps during this event refer to this as the two E's. Star has crafted this environment to be interactive and insightful, providing a space where you can make your own choices and then observe the potential impact of those choices on the realities that may transpire over the coming decade. Star has also infused the experience with deep sector expertise to ensure that beyond entertainment, which we hope you will certainly get from this event, you're also left with compelling and, most importantly, thought-provoking insights to ponder about the long-term future. And with that, let me introduce to the stage Valeria Bellaro, Vice President of Marketing at Star, who led the creation of this experience and is the best placed person to explain to us what it's all about. Valeria, good afternoon.
Hi, Richard. Hi, everybody. Greetings from Star Space in London. Welcome to our launch event. I'm very excited that this day is finally here. We have been waiting for it for a long time, and it's great to have all of you joining us for this occasion.
Thank you, Valeria. Now, you're launching a new experience that looks out 10 years or so and is very different from anything else we've seen before. Tell us what it's all about.
Sure. 10 years is not a period of time that seems like a long time, but when we think about 2014 and all of the changes that have happened between then and today, it is really clear that some pretty seismic shifts have occurred. I drive a fully electric car. I never have to worry about where I charge it. I don't remember last time I used cash or even one of my bank cards, thanks to mobile wallets. I speak to my GP on a Zoom, on video conference, on call. All of these things in 2014, we maybe spoke about them, but they were not really the reality or something that happened commonplace. So, what will the next 10 years look like? What will our healthcare look like? What will our finance look like? What will our transportation look like? It's pretty interesting, but the truth is that we cannot really predict it. At Star, we have this proprietary methodology that we call endgame thinking. And the idea is that you always start from the future and you try to envision what it is that you want to achieve. But how can you do it when future is so uncertain? So this is why we created 10Forward, because it's really not about forecasting and saying, this is what the future will look like, because we simply don't know. But it's really about provoking some thought processes. And it's really about modeling and saying that, in fact, quite a lot of different things can happen. And even a small change can snowball into quite an impactful event 10 years down the line. So we wanted to have a look at the different things that may come into play and inspire and provoke thoughts for our audiences to think about different scenarios in which, we may evolve as a human race, and then imagine, how would they and their brand, what role their industry would play under these scenarios.
Thank you. Now, looking at the initial report, you've created 4 worlds or scenarios which serve as the context of the experience. I needed to understand it. So could you explain how do they work? Why did you choose them, and what impact do they actually have on the output?
That's an excellent question. Before I do that, I suggest that we have a look at the 4 worlds. I think this is a kind of a case where seeing is much better than hearing. So yeah, please, everyone, pay close attention.
They look great. Tell us a little bit more about them.
Thank you. So we thought that, we need a framework, how we're going to be thinking about the future, because, possibilities are endless. So we decided to focus on 2 axes on how the humanity might evolve. And you may recognize some of these visions. So we focused on innovation, whether there will be high technological innovation or low technological innovation, and on the level of prosperity, low prosperity, high prosperity. This gave us a kind of, classical 4-quadrant model. And in fact, this is a framework that sci-fi movies use. So if you look at these worlds, you may recognize some of them from movies that you have seen or books that you have read. The idea is that here we looked to create 4 very distinct worlds, and these axes of innovation and prosperity allowed us to do that. So you will see that each of the worlds is a bit of an exaggeration. It's quite an extreme version of itself. The reason for that is that, of course, the future will be some sort of combination of the 4 or even something different. But we wanted to give you really different scenarios so that they trigger your imagination and enable you to think really boldly about the opportunities and risks that the future brings. So we're going to be looking at each of these worlds in much more detail during this presentation. So I'm not going to go terribly deeply into all of them, but visually you can already sort of feel that there is a world in which, technology is really strong, but prosperity is low. So it's a kind of very urban environment where there's kind of high social disparity. Think about Fifth Element or these kind of things, cyberpunk kind of feel. There's a world in which, it's a bit of utopia where we have high innovation that is really serving the needs of people and is really focused on environment and sustainability, on respect for the planet and creating this harmonious coexistence of technology and the planet. On the other side, with low technology innovation, we have a world that is which we call Bloomfield, which is a world where we have decided to go back to the basics and reconnect with our roots and live much more in secluded communities and reject technology a little bit. And then we have a world which is a kind of a post-apocalyptic scenario. Imagine Mad Max type of world where something terrible has happened. That means that the way of life as we know it is completely changed, and we need to rebuild and find ways to survive as a human race. So these are all, sounding very extreme and very unlikely that any of these would happen in 10 years from now. But again, it's all about provocation and getting you to think out of the box a little bit. And this is, the purpose with which we made them to be quite extreme. Another important element that I want to mention here about this experience is the level of personalization. Users can also take a quiz that will allow them to match their vision of the future with one of our worlds. I invite you all to play with this after the event. It is quite a lot of fun.
Excellent, thank you. Now, in the context of the 4 worlds that Star is highlighting, Star is also highlighting 3 sectors which we're going to go into in more detail after this session, which are the automotive and mobility sectors, healthcare and FinTech. I'm just wondering, what led you to highlight those three sectors and how do they fit into the foundation scenarios you've just discussed?
Yeah. There's two reasons, really. The first one being that Star is quite active across these three sectors. We're active across more sectors, but these three we have, these are the three where we have really long-standing expertise. And we have been involved and worked on some of the most innovative and groundbreaking projects within each of these three sectors. But the second reason is also because we believe that these are the sectors that have very high level of influence on the human experience. So when you think about the activities that you do on a daily basis, you know, your health, your finance, the way of getting from A to B, transportation, we are faced with experiences in these spaces every single day of our lives. And the opportunity for innovation and for reinvention in these spaces is really huge. So we believe that, you know, these are the spaces that are going to be really interesting to speak about and will also allow us to demonstrate the future by focusing on these three sectors.
Excellent. So before we launch into discussing those sectors more deeply in the following sessions, could you please give the attendees, you know, give us a quick review of how we should use the experience, what we should expect to get from it, so that, you know, so that no one is surprised or confused.
Absolutely. I do realize there's been a level of mystery around the whole thing. We did not want to reveal too much before we have officially launched, so it may seem a little bit unclear what to expect. So what you will find is that at the end of this live stream, we're going to share a link that will take you to the site where you can fill out the quiz or explore the 4 worlds that we have created on your own. It is really designed in a way for you to be an active participant of the worlds and explore them rather than just observe them as you would do with any sort of trend report or anything like that. So there's this really immersive experience where you can walk around the worlds, you can explore the different trends, you can see how the worlds have shifted and innovated into what they are. But there also is a ability to download a PDF that has much more in-depth insights from our expert and also from industry experts. And we have also included some actionable implementation playbooks. So the site itself is really aimed at giving you inspiration and provoking thought processes. And the PDF document is then intended for you to be able to get some actionable insights and implement some things. You will also find within the PDF document some tools and templates that you can use within your own organization to plan your journeys to innovation. I just want to again highlight that these trends, they're not forecasts. They're really aimed at starting thought processes and conversations. So please reach out also to our STAR crew if you would like to discuss what some of these trends might mean for you or how you might capitalize on them. And our colleagues will be very delighted to guide you or, you know, at the very least, geek out about the future.
That's great, Valeria. Thank you so much for explaining that so clearly. And now I can really look forward to actually having a play with it once it's actually gone live. So we're going to see you a little bit later when we wrap up. So thank you for participating.
Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you, everybody. Please enjoy, and I will see you soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Valeria. We're now into our first Insights immersion session, and we'll be kicking things off with the FinTech industry and exploring some key trends and innovations. I'm delighted to invite our first speakers to join me on the stage. Please welcome Henning Holter, Managing Director of FinTech at Star, and Andrea Prazakova, Senior Vice President of Mastercard Foundry and ESG for EEMEA. Let's give them a warm welcome as they share their insights with us today. Good afternoon, Henning and Andrea. Welcome to the event.
Hi, thank you, Richard, and thank you to all the participants who have joined us. It's great to be here with Andrea. Not only is she a great fintech expert, but also living proof that fintech is anything but boring. And we will have a discussion. We're looking at a couple of trends. There are many more in the report. Now, I encourage you to explore that and see how they might evolve in the different scenarios. But first of all, let's just take a quick look at a video to set the stage a bit. All right, let's dive in. There are so many fundamental changes on how we bank, how we trade, how we pay, interact with financial services. Concepts like tokenization, smart contracts, open banking, embedded payment, etc. But let's just discuss a couple of trends specifically, and starting with digital identities merging with digital wallets, if you will. Cash is already disappearing from us. We don't see a scenario in our work here that reverses that trend. And most of us as consumers, contactless has already taken over completely from the way we pay for our goods. And businesses are also trading differently. But what's interesting, we're moving from already moving from a phone-based solution to wearables. I mean, I can briefly show you here. If you can see that, a little chip I have embedded in my nail, which contains my business card and credit cards, which I can use to tap and pay. So it's already here to some extent. It's combining ID, credit card, office access cards. Everything's going digital. Some people might find that unnerving, and I think it's a natural evolution, I think, but it's much more than convenience, right? And it creates opportunities for example, financial inclusion. What do you think? What do you think are some of the benefits of this development?
First of all, hi Henning, hi Richard, and hello everybody in the audience. I'm so excited to be here, and I love that whole comparison with the movies. I actually think that everything was already invented in Steven Spielberg movies, right? Or somebody else's. We're just in an implementation phase, and it's just a question, what will happen. And, I want to maybe take a step back on the digital identity and wallets, and maybe I like the word provoking, right? And provoke maybe the imagination, and would encourage everybody maybe to add their ideas into the chat as well, right? So let's think about the hardware, right? I mean, in the past we had cash in our wallets. Now we have it in our phones, right? I think that, and we have it in wearables, and I like your nail polish. I tested it as well. It's brilliant, and it just blows everybody. If you go to a conference or something, it's just a great conversation starter. If you think about the hardware, right, with the latest announcements, what Neuralink did, I mean, Elon Musk with the implementation of chips into brain, right? MIT did a lot of technologies right now where you can actually, with your thoughts, give consent, right? So I feel that even though we show biometric, I think biometric will be gone very, very soon. It will be combination, especially in the area of deep fakes and the newer technology. We will have to have a much more, I would say, complicated and complex kind of how we protect our identity, right? And I think Neuralink is a really fantastic showcase that we might not have even any phones. There might be that the hardware will move from obviously phone and wearable into chip and all the spatial computing devices, right? I think this is, I mean, I'm a born optimist, and I'm sure there is a lot of negative things which, we can discuss and, be put down by, but I feel that the hardware plays a very significant role. So for me, number one, the identities will move from a traditional, where we have it already in our phones, for example, on our wearable. It will move into a hardware system, which will be maybe a combination of multiple different almost tokens, which will ensure that you Henning, you cannot impersonate me, even if you would have the most beautiful blonde, a deep fake, but so I think that the hardware is a really critical piece. I see that there is a massive trend and opportunities for fintech industry to bring these kind of new devices in, right? In terms of the ID, I mean, today we still have a lot of decentralized information, right? So you will have your national ID, you will have some insurance card, you will have maybe your bank account. All of that is somehow your identity, because it contains data, right? Data about yourself and about your behavior. So if you imagine and provoke yourself to say, okay, I want to have a one joint token, and token which represent Henning in a physical world, and then you will have a token which will represent you in a Web3 world, and I will get there just now, right? So in the physical world, your token will not only have your national identity, right, and your social security number, but it will contain your health data. It will contain your wealth data. So you will have, to this token, you will have multiple different other tokens, your property, your car, your jewelry, maybe the painting which is behind you, maybe you are a sneakerhead, so you have very expensive Nike sneakers, so it will be your sneakers. And then obviously it will have also access, right? So instead of your access card, the moment you will start to work somewhere, the access will be again connected to your identity and the token. So imagine it almost like multi-token personal ID, if I can say it, right? Now, I want to put a twist to it, and I would be interesting what the audience is thinking, right? That all is connected to data ownership. So it's very critical that new businesses, again, will start up, which will manage with data brokers and data aggregators. The Gen Z and the Gen Alpha, we still may be old-fashioned, so we most trust the banks, right? I'm not sure my kids will do that. I think that they will probably trust somebody which is verified by some other kind of mechanism, which could be smart contracts, could be, other different technologies. So who will be the data aggregator and data broker? How will you give a permission to extend your data to Richard, who wants to take something, maybe Richard wants to talk to you, but I am your data broker. So you will give me advice and say, okay, if Richard wants to talk to me and he wants my details to be exposed, he needs to pay you $20, you keep 5 and you give me 15. So there will be a really shift in data economies in the future, where we will not just put data everywhere, but we actually will be able to harness our own data, because that's very valuable, right? To know, if you look at all my data, you know so much about me. And the second piece is, and then I really want to spin it, it's, imagine now with Web3, right? So we are digitally native. Our children are virtually native. That's a big difference, right? Digital native is, I'm on my phone, right? I still scroll on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, so it doesn't make me look so old. But I cannot, TikTok is obviously too far from me. Now, think about Web3 environments, right? And I'm not talking now, putting only VR environments, but being in either gamified, being decentralized, being in sandbox, being all these different areas where you can enjoy vacation, go shopping, where we create secondary identities. So we might, in the future, obviously, hopefully all of these worlds will be interconnected. So you will have your own identity. So, Henning, Richard, you will have your own avatar. Who will own the ID of that avatar? How it will be managed? And I think that's a really interesting point. Again, opportunity for new industries and new technologies to be invented by fintechs, so that you can, maybe, Richard will have 5 houses in Decentraland, which he will be renting. I know Richard is very happy about it. So he will have income in Decentraland. He might have houses which he will be able to sell. All of them will have tokens in the virtual world, right? And he will own them. Now, God forbid something happens to Richard, right? Now probably he's not so happy about that I chose his name. Who will manage his will?
Yeah.
In terms of his digital identities, his digital footprint, his photos, his properties, his digital sneakers, and so on. So I think, again, the merge of this digital and virtual worlds, I think it's one of the big trends which I'm really excited about. Secondly is the different types of tokenization of kind of assets, if it is our personal data, health data, wealth data, Web3 ownership data, all of that together, and the new industries which will be coming up. And of course, financial inclusion is brilliant in that, right? Because you give access with all of this, it gives access to new innovation. And I think in Web3 especially, maybe you can be farmer by day, and at evening you can go and create new skins somewhere in Web3 world and have a secondary income, right? And that could go to your digital wallet, right?
It's a whole new discussion, but how the banks will adapt to this and stay relevant in that world is a big ask. But let's move on.
That's a $1 million question, and I think we would need to steal time from.
Exactly. I think, but let's move on to the next trend if we can, and looking at the transition of AI and getting the ethics right. Gen AI has now actually been around for a little while, and the tech development is moving faster than adoption, which is perhaps not that surprising. And hopefully it means that companies just want to get it right. And clearly a well thought through roadmap is important for companies to embrace this. But, it strikes to me it's innovation in AI is actually just as much about how we change the way we do things as opposed to access to the latest tech. It's behavioral change that's interesting here, and how we deal with as companies, how we deal internally with employees as well as customers. Do you agree?
Yes, I think so. AI is here since 1956, right? We just didn't, not everybody knew about it, right? The majority of people got introduced to it with ChatGPT, right? But obviously there was a lot of development over past years in deep learning, machine learning, neural link networks, LMLs, and so on. So if you look at, I think that there are two pieces to it, right? One is how much of that what we're doing will be augmented and how much will be automated, right? And what does it mean for us? So I think that in these worlds you have, these different assistants and so on, right? In the two worlds. So if you look at it, I think one of the areas which I feel it's very important for companies to start now to not to lose up on the trend is to do upskilling of their employees, right? There are reports where by 2030 about 30% of jobs will be automated, which will impact about 800 million jobs. That's quite substantial, and that doesn't even cover the much bigger percentage which will be augmented, right? Augmentation means that it makes me faster, better, more efficient, so it gives me more time to do different tasks, right? So ultimately, in the stage of AI, I would suggest that number one is focus on upskilling, right? Because the trend is focus on humans. We invest so much into technology, and I think it's only a very small percentage of people who getting exposed to it, the early adopters and people who are really curious. But I think that the big trend for me, the massive change will be once we start to bring it into education system, right? So democratization of education, it's super critical, right? The moment we ourselves, not only children education, but our education, every kind of generation will have a basis of understanding, will be much more creative, much more efficient. New businesses will start with AI, and it will be not left to a small percentage of people. So I really think that the key trend I would like to see is education, and really change in education, because it's not happening right now. It's really happening in the fintech world, but education is still running behind. Plus it will democratize education for people who don't have access to it. I think that's a trend which I'm super excited about. So education and healthcare, I think there is a massive opportunity. There are obviously a lot of fintechs already today which offer many of these things, but it's not democratized. So today, I lived in Africa for 9 years. My kids are from South Africa. So if you think children who don't have access to private schools, they will be able on their phones have an AI tutor, right? Like Synthetics, which was created by SpaceX, right? Or by one of the guys who created school for SpaceX, where child would have access to a tutor on his phone, which will be adapted to the way how the child learns. So somebody is more visual, somebody listens, it's better to listen, whatever. And the tone of voice, everything will be adapted to you. So the level of your comprehension education will be so much better. Today, a child sits in a class of 20 to 30, maybe 40 children with a lessons of 40 minutes. How much can you remember? Nothing. So many children are left behind. So I think that that's a trend which I'm super, super chuffed about. The second one is healthcare. Again, massive opportunity for fintechs, right? Not only from prevention of diseases. So if today you use my glucose monitor and my Aura ring and all the devices I'm wearing on myself, and you combine it together, you should be able to detect that maybe in 1 week I will have a heart attack because the body tells you all these signals, right? That can be fed into insurance companies, right? So insurance company can know
Of course.
and adjust their insurance policies, help me to live longer, live happier. They would be through neural link and network, they will be able to measure the happiness stage of my brain, because obviously depression is not only in your head, right? It's the entire body and how the mitochondria in your brain is operating. So with this fantastic technology combining with AI, you will be able to predict if maybe, Andrea will get just super depressed. So you can send signals through her AI doctor to say, Andrea, go for a walk, do 20-minute meditation, have a therapy, or, whatever it is. So I think that the healthcare piece is just like, imagine, right? How many people it will help, how much healthier we will be, but also the opportunities for the industries for cancer disease, personal, if you are, I go back, maybe not to Africa this time, but maybe Latin America or here in our region, Pakistan. If you need to go to a doctor, you probably need to go and live in a village. You need to get onto a bus. You have to pay a bus fare. You probably need to take a day off from work. Then you sit at the doctor for maybe 2 hours to get some treatment. And that's a GM who doesn't have maybe all the insights on his hand. Now in the future, already technology exists today, right? Where you are able to speak to an AI doctor to give you first-hand diagnosis. So there is a lot of things in that space.
And also, to bring, I totally agree, and that's very exciting actually. And the educational thing, it also relates to, educational or educational finance, making people more aware of what's available to them. Not only can companies use AI effectively to target and to present the right product to the right person at the right time, but also you can make people help people actually choose the better product, right?
I love in the video, you have this save now, pay later, which is obviously reverse psychology, and I really liked it, right? And I was thinking, because if you think about adults and children, right, we are now in the world of consumerism, right? So we do something and then there is a big impact. So definitely AI predictability, it's able to say, if you continue to do this like this is how your financial life will look like, right? It can really help you to fulfill your goals much better and optimize, because I think I think in one of your videos you had that financial advisor, right?
Yeah.
And I almost visualize it without a phone, right? Or maybe this will happen in the next 2 years, maybe even earlier, right? That each of us will have our own personal advisor. Yeah. If we're ready to expose our data, let's say I am ready to expose my health data and all my wealth data, so what I own, and not only house, car, painting, but everything, your insurance policies, everything all together. You feed it, you give it access to the data. Then the personalized AI assistant, which will be to you, will be able to guide you in the right decision and make predictability model.
Okay, Andrea, I need to stop you there because we need to see if we can squeeze in a question from the audience if we can, Richard. Okay. We'd love to hear from the audience.
I would love to as well. Guys, speed up. We have 60 seconds. I know Richard will cut us off.
Yeah.
We actually didn't encourage questions from audience. Maybe, Henning, we are so blown away by the imagination that they will have a neural link in their brain and, accept transactions that they now can't think about any questions.
There are lots more interesting insights in the report as well, so go play with it.
I'm really excited to read that as well, and I would encourage everybody to do so.
Yeah.
Very quick question from the audience. In what ways are financial services integrating sustainability into their core business operations beyond simply offering green finance products? A couple of sentences each.
Right up your wheelhouse, Andrea. I don't know. Can you go?
Sorry, there was something popped up in the. What did you say? How does?
In what ways are financial services companies integrating sustainability into their core businesses beyond just offering green finance?
I like that a lot. So if you look at it again so you have obviously scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? Emissions, right? And in that you decide what do you want to do? How do you want to adapt your operations? For example, energy efficiency. So you into managing energy efficiency, our time is up, right? So say using the water in the right way, using the electricity in the right way, and really, decouple what you can do. And that one big portion for sustainability, as I mentioned in the beginning, is sustainability of your workforce. And I think that's a key piece which I would love to see coming in the next 12 months, because I'm very concerned that companies are not doing enough to upskilling their employees with whatever is happening today with the technology. So they will make our skills redundant and obsolete, right? Because it's not only about the planet, it's about the people. And I think that the people are actually key so that we can thrive, right? And then obviously then you have it on the product. And I can see Henning is just kicking me out. This is like the music.
I totally
start to play so I get off the stage.
I totally wouldn't be boring. So thank you for your time, Andrea. Fantastic. I'd love to spend another hour with you, but we can't. Thank you, Richard. We're done here. You can move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Henning and Andrea, for your great participation and insights. We're now going to move on to the automotive and mobility session. And we're now ready to dive into our second technology insights session. And here we'll be looking at the automotive and mobility industry and exploring some key trends and innovations. I'm delighted to invite our esteemed speakers for the automotive mobility session to join us. Please welcome Andrew Fellows, Global Head of Automotive and Mobility at Star, Jim Brown, VP of Cockpit AI Intelligent Drive Tech at Stellantis, and Raj Manachal, In-Vehicle Infotainment Development Division Leader, American Honda Motor Company. Let's give them a warm welcome. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Richard. So we're going to watch a short video in a little while, which talks a little bit about our vision of 10Forward for the automotive and mobility industry. As Valeria said today, it might be a little bit extreme. But afterwards, we're going to have a discussion of a couple of items that, two trends that Jim and Raj and I have picked out. And with that in mind, let's watch the video and then we'll get into a discussion about AI, about the future of EVs, and about the software-defined vehicles. So I hope you'll be inspired as I am by this discussion. Thank you. So let's get into the first discussion. I guess we're looking at an industry that has gone through decades of change, whether it's been resorting the supply chains around the world, entering the Chinese market, looking at customer centricity, which is still an ongoing journey for the industry. But maybe a first question, if we think about autonomous mobility and we think about the adoption of electric vehicles, we've seen companies such as Stellantis with fantastic financial results in the last year. We've seen American Honda and Honda in a wider sense cooperating with Nissan on future EVs and looking at how they personalize the in-car experience. But as a first question, how do you both view, and I'll ask Raj to go first and then Jim, the adoption of electric vehicles and the adoption of autonomous technologies? And just as a hint, I spent the last 2 years driving a German car, I won't mention which one it is, that had level 3 autonomy, at least in theory. Whether I was supposed to turn it all on or not is a whole other matter from a legal viewpoint. But what has changed in terms of the adoption of EVs and autonomous technology, and what's going to happen over the next 10 years? And the reason I ask that question is I look at it and I say, what will be possible and what is reasonable? And given the downturn slightly in the US and Europe of EVs over the last couple of months in terms of sales volume, is that just a blip? And is EV adoption going to continue? So what do you think has happened so far? And what's your opinion? And what's going to happen in the next decade? Over to you, Raj, first, and then Jim.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, audience. Thank you for the wonderful broad question here, Andrew. So EV sales in general, you are very right about that, right? There was an initial huge spike, maybe with the early adopters, and maybe we're seeing the Gardner curve of hype, right? And now people are understanding there are some challenges that we all need to come over, like infrastructure. As you know, we're still building the infrastructure out for EV to support the EVs, especially that's a pretty big challenge in a wide, big country like the United States. We need thousands and thousands of charging stations. Maybe those factors are in as well. And also maybe some incentives, so to speak, are maybe drying out, right? And people are making rational decisions. And there's also another lane that's moving in parallel, which is the battery technology. So there are quite a few challenges people are getting educated about, right? And then there are choices there now too, not just one or two companies. Now almost everybody has an EV offering and we can work with them. So what I feel is people are going to actually make smarter decisions about committing and changing their source of energy, how they propel their mobility. So it's going to maybe looks like slowing down, but actually it's good. We're going to choose the right technology, the right means to propel our future, right? That's what I feel about the EVs. Of course, customers expect EV from Stellantis or our company, and they want it now or yesterday. So we do have to meet the market needs, of course. But I'm excited about the changes that's going to happen 10 years from now. And as far as autonomous, that's another fantastic question, right? I mean, there was the initial big hype about driverless taxis and several things. And I'm still super excited and optimistic about autonomous. But at the same time, we do need to realize with autonomous driving, there is responsibility shift actually on the driver. Right? The way I see it is it's like an autopilot system. So I'm a private pilot myself, right? And I've been trained about these things a little bit. So if you're using an autopilot, actually your responsibility is of much higher level. Now you're monitoring not just what's happening, but you're monitoring the systems as well. Are they functioning properly? Are they making the right decisions that you would make, right? So I think instead of just blindly relying on autonomous and going to sleep, the education and continuous learning of drivers is also something that I'm excited to be part of and influence that. And of course, we need to talk about standardization and things like that. But let me pause for now and maybe give you a second to ask questions or Jim to talk about his opinions.
Yeah, I can jump in for a minute. So the EV adoption rate, I think, has been, and I drive an EV. I absolutely love a BEV. I've been driving one for a number of years now. I think part of what has really depressed the EV adoption is because using an EV is a very, very complex task today. Planning where you're going to charge, how far you're going to get, how do you manage the battery? Do you have to sit somewhere for a couple of hours? This is a complicated task, and it's the responsibility of the OEMs to be able to make it a simple task. And the primary tool, I believe, in our toolbox to do that is AI. And of course, I'm slightly biased because that's pretty much what I focus on. But the ability of AI, its major role in these types of things is to make complex systems simple, to look at all of the different factors and be able to integrate them into a human understandable decision tree. But it can only do that successfully if the solutions being deployed are able to establish a trust relationship with the user, right? So the key to AI success is this trust relationship. And I believe that the key to EV success is going to be AI making EVs easy to use. And then I think the reason that these two topics, autonomy and EV, link together so much is because you have exactly the same issues in autonomy. So autonomy is, to a large extent, about trust. It's about AI systems building trust with both individual users and society in general, that they will make the optimal decisions and be able to manage things. And that's a hard thing to build. It takes time to build that. It takes a lot of interaction with the users, but that's where I think the key factors are here. It's about making these systems easy to digest and use. So,
and do you both think that consumers are ready to adopt that technology? Because you talk about trust. I mean, apart from the political and legal framework of having, driverless vehicles and potentially driverless electric vehicles, do you think that is an education issue, or is it simply a matter of time? Like we got used to the smartphone, and then all of a sudden we had a really fantastic smartphone.
Personally, and I hear what Raj thinks, but personally, I believe it's a matter of time. It's an experiential issue. It's about creating the vehicles that have the features that enable it to be trustworthy and approached, getting them out there, and then at that point, it's word of mouth. My friend uses one; he loves it. So it's about matter of time. It's about getting it out there and then having it prove its value.
Well, as the man who's moving from a V8 petrol engine a couple of months ago to a future EV, I can't disagree with that. Maybe we'll move to the next slide if we can, because I've got two questions on the next one. So shifting gears a little bit, we've talked about the vehicle, we've talked about electric vehicles. I don't want to address the issue of range anxiety. That's something for a whole separate meeting all on its own. But hyper-personalized cars. I mean, we hear from the industry a lot about AI-driven consumer experiences. We hear about in-car assistants, right? If you think of the Neo Nomi that turns and talks to you in the Chinese market and now in Europe and in the US. And if we think about the expression digital personalization, they sound like great buzzwords, but from the industry, but what actually does it mean? How is AI going to drive that in-car experience? What's there today and what's coming in the future?
Andrew, let me go first in this one. So here's one perspective that I want to bring. Can we hyper-personalize a car to just you or me based on some learnings with AI? I think the answer is yes. But the success, one perspective for a key point of success is the experience in the car is not something that's separate. It has to be involved or integrated into the ecosystem of how I'm using these in the house, right? So say, for example, you're using a particular streaming service for video or audio in the house, and you're listening to some podcast as you're getting ready for work, and you're going to come to the car. Your car's hyper-personalized and user-adaptive systems, I'm looking at the slide here, should be a continuation of what you were experiencing just a minute before you stepped into the car. So it can't be something exclusive and separate, right? So the success now comes, we have to connect everything around you, ecosystem, for the success of it, right? So today, of course, you can use several systems in the car. And let me go back historically speaking, like 20 years ago, like early 2000s, right? We automakers had the GPS map, locate you on the map and we can show you where you're going. And you had to only interact with us to find out where the next gas station is or putting in an address or something like that. There was no seeking information outside of this ecosystem, right? But now today you can use Siri or Android or Alexa to find information from outside the world while you're driving, right? You can order your dog food that you forgot using Alexa. But we have to somehow integrate the vehicle experience along with the rest of your life for us to be successful. And that's where the exciting opportunity is there for me. That's one perspective from me. Thank you.
And that's a huge challenge. It's a huge technical challenge because what the OEMs do not want to do and probably shouldn't do is simply give up the consumer relationship to the big tech companies. But on the other hand, these systems have to be integrated. So there is a continuity of experience. There is a holistic view. So what my home assistant knew about me and predicted about me and advised me of has got to be aligned with what my vehicle system does. So I think this is probably driving us towards interoperation and standards hopefully, in terms of handoff mechanisms for those kind of relationships. But that's a big technical challenge, and we've barely scratched the surface. So I'd say that's one of the big challenges in the next 5 years is how do you integrate and make these experiences holistic?
Right. I'm old enough to remember there being a discussion in the early 2000s and late 90s about, we're going to have, the integration into the vehicle of certain things. And then the OEM said, of course, we'll control that. And the Vodafones, the T-Mobiles of this world said, no, you won't. We control the bandwidth.
Yep.
So now we're in a situation where the OEMs are facing being part of a digital ecosystem, a digital universe, right? Inside the vehicle and out, rather than being the kings of the castle, the kings of the universe. Does that offer revenue streams to the OEMs?
It offers revenue streams. It also offers the opportunity to emphasize the skills of the OEM. So I was commenting to someone a couple of days ago, the last thing I would want to do is drive a car that had been built by a phone manufacturer, right? Because I'd probably die very, very quickly. And so I think it's about being able to, across these partnerships, leverage the skills of the different operations. So what we OEMs know about very, very well is about how a car works, how you drive, all of the dynamics of the vehicle systems. And we need to be bringing that knowledge into how we create these symbiotic solutions with the tech companies, rather than trying to say, we're going to take it all, or the tech company saying, we're going to take it all. We got to be able to figure out how we bring together and leverage the knowledge and values of each organization. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Big challenge.
It is, but certainly we've, the industry's mastered a lot of challenges before. I'm certain we can do this as well. But that sharing revenue idea is a painful one, right? And you mentioned the there's a not to be named Chinese manufacturer that's gone from phones to cars very recently.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting challenges. Maybe a last question for the time we've got left. The software-defined vehicle. It sounds great, right? I don't think anybody actually knows what it is, or maybe they do. You guys probably do. There was an announcement a couple of days ago that Volkswagen is going to launch its full software-defined vehicle in 2028. It was on the front of Automotive News and Automotive News Europe and Automobile Woche in Germany. Big announcement, notwithstanding any challenges that their carrier unit or any other IT part of an OEM might have. What do you think is going to change in the operating models of OEMs? I mean, they've been constantly changing and price pressure on tier ones and everything else. But what's going to change because of that software-defined vehicle? And what does the future look like looking into the next 10 years?
Great question. And we have limited time, so I'll keep it short. I believe there needs to be some, of course, there will be developments in the architecture of the vehicle, which is the foundational piece. But there needs to be some standardization as well. There can't be so many ecosystems between brands and things like that. And also software-defined vehicle is always something that's connected. It doesn't necessarily mean that we want to sell something to customer all the time. It could just mean that we're going to adapt our experiences based on your usage and preferences continually, because we are software enabled and the architecture allows for that update, things like that. Of course, the negative connotation of software-defined vehicle everybody feels is that, we're going to start charging you for every feature, and features are going to be on-demand basis. I don't think that's true. The potential is yet to be scratched, but I'm excited about the software-defined future and working in this space right now. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we already sell software-defined vehicles. It's not a new thing. Our vehicles are driven by software, and they have been for a very long time.
Yep.
What's changing is the architecture of that software, the configurability, the ability to adjust and adapt it, possibly for monetization, possibly for safety, possibly for avoiding recalls. But we're already shipping software-defined vehicles. What we have to get really good at is creating those levers that we can manage the software-defined vehicles on an ongoing basis. And that's a systems engineering problem. That's about how the different systems fit together and how do you make them robust enough that it's okay to release a change. Someone, again, I was discussing at the SAE meeting a couple of days ago with, you change the way that the turn signal clicks, right? All of a sudden, you have possibly inadvertently impacted the way the steering column works, impacted the way the electronics on the instrument cluster work, and so while we already have a vehicle that we could patch and update easily, the possible risk of doing that is so high that the QA processes overwhelm us. And so I think getting to software-defined vehicle is more about getting a good intelligent architecture to how the vehicle can be updated. So that's, I think that aligns with what you were saying, Raj. It's about how you update it. Yeah.
Well, we've got 37 seconds according to my clock, so I'm going to hand over to Richard. But first of all, Jim, Raj, thank you very, very much. You've given me lots to think about. And I guess we might have 20 seconds or so for a question if there is one.
We have. Thank you, Raj and Jim. I'd like to remind everyone there are many more insights in the report that will go live on the website. And we've got one question. And also in the meantime, the audience can participate in the ongoing poll. So very quickly, do you believe that digital personalization of the vehicle will generate new revenue streams for the OEMs? And I guess this is a yes, no answer with a big opportunity, small opportunity answer.
Yes, big opportunity.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the key, though, is again, it goes back to trust. The key is to monetize things that the user can easily understand the OEM has added value to, which is why having bought a complete seat heating system and trying to charge people to activate it didn't work, but giving access to algorithms to make the engine perform better does, because the user can accept that they're actually buying something. So it's not like a blank check. It's picking the right things to monetize.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. All the questions we did receive, and we've received a lot, we will address them in follow-up communications from Star. So thank you once again, Andrew, Raj, Jim. Thank you for your time and for your great views.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll now move on to the health tech session, which is the last of our industry sessions, but by no means the least. And with that, I'm very pleased to welcome our distinguished speakers for the health tech session onto the stage. Please join me in welcoming Sari Kaganoff, Chief Commercial Officer at Rock Health, and Chris Scales, Head of Strategy and Business Design at Star. Let's give them a warm welcome as they dive into their views today. Chris, Sari, good afternoon, and over to you, Chris.
Good afternoon, Richard. Great to be here. Really looking forward to talking a little bit about the future of healthcare. First of all, Sari, also great to have you on board. And so why don't we kick off by showcasing our endgame thinking around the healthcare space. Great. So yeah, some really, really thought-provoking scenarios there. I think, in my opinion, excellent examples of lateral thinking, and certainly made me think a little bit about what the potential futures could look like. Sorry, any sort of reflections from your side?
Yeah, and thank you for having me join today. Firstly, I want to commend the STAR team for really forcing us to think 10 years out. Sometimes we get caught in the day-to-day, and it's hard to really take that big picture view. So firstly, I think that is thought-provoking. I think for me, the real insight here is the question around risk and opportunity and balancing those things, because you can see we all want to strive for the good scenarios in the ecosystem world, but that involves taking risks. So how do we balance, when are we going to take a risk? When is it too much of a risk? If we don't take those risks, we'll end up in a bad scenario. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as we take on new technologies and figure out what we can do with them. Where do we want to take the risks? How do we mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also, inherently unused to thinking about the less bright futures. So it did also make me think out of my comfort zone. So, but I think that's also a healthy exercise. Let's dive into the first trend. Obviously, we can't talk about healthcare without talking about AI. Obviously, this is going to be the fundament that's going to drive our conversation through the three trends that we've identified. Obviously, it creates benefits for patients, but also it's creating a lot of benefits for care professionals. And before I hand over to you, Sari, I think we want to dive into the care professional space first and talk about the potential benefits that AI will bring. And to set the scene a little bit, I just want to highlight the point that in the healthcare space, there's a major problem that the healthcare is facing. And that's ultimately, there's going to be a global shortfall of healthcare professionals in the future. So by 2030, according to World Health Organization, there will be a shortfall of 10 million healthcare workers. So with that in mind, Sari, handing over to you, talk a little bit about how AI is going to address that issue.
Yeah, so what's interesting is we see AI not just in healthcare. Obviously, we saw in the prior two panels, it's everywhere. It's in FinTech, it's in automotive, and we'll see those trends playing out as well within healthcare. But we actually at Rock Health collect a lot of data on the digital health ecosystem. And what we saw in Q1 this year is that 40% of startups raising funds in the US had an AI component. So I think, yes, there's challenges, but the solution's on the way, I think is what we can consider. What we're starting to see play out already is a lot of administrative burden use cases already taking hold. So things addressing physician burnout, helping with note synthesis, billing and coding, benefits verification, a lot of the painful minutia that is not why providers went into healthcare in the first place. So hopefully we can take care of some of those first. I think what's incredibly exciting is the potential for some of the more clinical use cases, which we also saw in the scenario, which is things like better diagnostics through data analysis, reading imagery, potentially symptom checkers or nurse companions that are AI driven and other things like that. And that will take to the point before of risk. It's a little bit longer to adopt because of some of the risks that we need to mitigate and assess for, but that is definitely a second area. I think the third thing to consider is where AI can enhance other technologies that we already have in use in healthcare. So one example of that is virtual reality, where it's in place for surgical planning, for actual surgical execution, pain management, and other things. And AI can actually really enhance those technologies and make them much better and more adaptive and time. And so I think we'll see kind of more pure play scenarios already taking off that are administrative, future more clinical, but also AI embedding into other technologies and making them better.
I'm curious to hear your point of view on, the healthcare community and their general willingness to adopt and use these technologies. We know it's a very, very conservative, environment, right? So what's your thoughts on how do we gain traction? How do we gain buy-in from the care community?
So I think the first thing is solve a real problem that they have, right? And that's why starting with the administrative use cases is a good idea. Yeah. Although folks are nervous about using new technologies, if you can immediately take away a pain point, and for example, they call it pajama time, a lot of clinicians spend time in the evening writing up their notes. If we can immediately make that better, they'll start to see that, oh wow, we can use these technologies. So I would say that's one. A second element is making sure when we're talking about clinical use cases that we're not using a black box. So there is an explainable way to go back and say, why did the AI say this? Where did it come from? What's the data from? So folks can go and check the results in the beginning as they get comfortable. And then a third thing I think is quite interesting is there was a recent survey of medical students asking them what they thought, whether AI was going to transform radiology, and about 80% of them said yes. And so I do think that part of this is also generational, where medical students who grow up using ChatGPT to take their exams are going to feel more comfortable using AI in their clinical setting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, that said, I don't think medical schools have yet adapted to that.
Yeah.
I was talking to a medical student recently, and he said, we don't talk about this at all in school. So I would encourage those of you in the audience who are involved with medical schools, we need to be teaching doctors now so that when they get there in 10 years or less, hopefully, they're ready.
Yeah, I love the idea of, relieving the administrative burden. I think, you talked about physician burnout, right? I think there's a statistic in the US, 42% of physicians admit to feeling burnout. And ultimately, because they're investing all their time typing up, patient notes, putting them into an EMR, et cetera. And I think a lot of it is around, if you can relieve them of those tasks, they can invest their time in things that are more meaningful to them, right? Which is human to human conversations with patients. And I think a lot of it is about, sort of if you can help to, motivate and inspire them that this is really going to create value for them in their daily life and their purpose. I think that's a really, really powerful way of driving adoption.
Absolutely. And maybe to highlight one thing that you said is that people sometimes think of AI and technology as we're moving away from the human experience, but actually it can enable us to lean into the human experience. So for the clinicians, it can take away some of the burden so they can talk to their patients, and so viewing it as an enabling tool for that versus we're moving into a world where we're all talking to robots.
Right. And so the irony is AI can humanize the world more than automate it, right? And I think that's the point. Can we go into the next slide? So obviously, then there's a whole story around how AI is going to bring value to patients. We know that there's a big trend in the healthcare industry to decentralize care delivery. So there'll be more care delivered in the home. What you see in this image here is, what I found fascinating about this image is kind of a vision of the future smart home. And, the term smart home has been a buzzword. It's been around for a long time. And so one of the questions I have is, is healthcare the next frontier of the smart home? I mean, when you look at this image, you'll probably see there's some sort of smart mirror. Probably there's going to be some computer vision technology embedded into that, using some sort of digital biomarker to make some predictions of your mental health or early stage dementia or something like that. So talk a little bit about your thoughts around digital biomarkers and the role they're going to be playing in empowering the smart home.
Yeah. So I think it's an incredibly exciting area of healthcare. And we saw earlier, if our colleagues are willing to wear a chip on their finger for their credit card information, right. I imagine many of us will be willing to wear some kind of biomarker assessment tracking for our health. But what's interesting is there's so many types of biomarkers, and they can really teach us so much about human health that it's fascinating. I mean, we have devices such as, smartwatches, obviously been around for a while, rings. You have cell phone cameras that can just look at your face and detect blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, oxygen saturation. We have smart toilets now, which can detect heart disease. It's amazing. So there's Wi-Fi trackers, just put them in the Wi-Fi and it puts rays around your house and can detect falls and other things. So the array of ways that we can track our bodies and our wellness and health is really expanding. And I think what's fascinating is it's becoming also more passive and continuous, right? So it's a set it and forget it. It might be in your home, but not something you're paying attention to all the time. And so that creates a lot of data, which can help us understand trend lines and our health in a whole new way. And what's fascinating about that is, AI is great, but you need to feed AI data in order to be able to have it process and come out with some insight. So the digital biomarkers are actually helping us create that data and that baseline. And what that does is it turns health and wellness from a point in time, I went to the doctor, he said X, to no, actually, we know your baseline health. It's XYZ. Now there's a change. Let's go assess that. And you'll find that change much earlier than you would have had you waited to go to the doctor until you felt something happen. Yeah. So I do think we'll see this kind of merging of healthcare and wellness as it starts to be what's your standard wellness health range and what's changing and how do we assess that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think there's obvious benefits of digital biomarkers and the fact that they passively track, right? So currently, there's a lot of digital therapeutics, remote therapeutic tools out there that are dependent on active tracking. And so it's very much dependent on behavior change of the consumer, whereas with passive tracking, you kind of overcome that, right? So if the patient doesn't actively track, then the fidelity of the data is going to be questionable. So that's what I find really interesting about the passive tracking piece. It can potentially overcome that problem and increase the quality of the data, as you say, which is going to enable better clinical decision making.
Exactly. And then, if people have smart light bulbs and smart, voice detection and things like that in their home, imagine in the future when you have a fridge and a stove and your toilet seat and your TV and all of the devices and your Wi-Fi are all connected and all tracking your health. Also your cars, like we talked about before, I'm sure your car can also track. And so that'll really help us just live our lives, but be aware of our health and our health status. I do think there's an interesting question of who becomes responsible, and they talked about that a bit before with the health insurance point, but who becomes responsible then? Is it, if you're not going to the doctor and there is just an alert that something's wrong, is it up to you to go? Is there a different service that's tracking you all the time? Is it your health insurance? Is that too Big Brother? I think there's a lot of questions we need to sort out of how that will come into play. But the technology potential is exciting, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. We talked about it in the Automotive Mobility. Who's going to own the patient relationship, right? Because ultimately, there's going to be a direct, there's going to be a channel to the patient or the consumer if we're talking about consumer health. And the question is who's going to own that, right? When we're thinking about the future of the smart home, and I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Will this pave the path for new market entrants? Will big tech and consumer electronics companies that already own that space, is that an opportunity for them to enter this market?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an opportunity. Some of them have tried with the health records, and some of those efforts have failed. Yeah. But I think because we have not solved it yet, I think there's a real opportunity for consumer-oriented services that enable folks to have access and own their data, but also to be supported in that by big or consumer-oriented companies.
Yeah, let's move on to the next slide, please. So we're going to finish by talking about personalization. We just talked about personalization in the Automotive Mobility section. So again, interesting to see so many common themes going across the industries. I wanted to just touch a little bit on, we talked about care professionals, we talked about patients, and we also need to talk about that interplay between them, right? So ultimately, for all of this to work, if we want to, make better diagnostic decisions using patient data, there has to be, the way I see it, some sort of shared accountability coming from all stakeholders in that ecosystem. What's your perspective on that, and what are the barriers that need to be overcome to actually maybe to achieve that end game?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when we talk about the healthcare in the home, we're talking about almost like a consumer-driven experience. But then when we're talking about personalization, I think we can think of it from a lot of different ways, right? So there's an element of the experience that you're having in the healthcare setting can be personalized by the clinician. There's even personalized medicine. I mean, a quarter of the FDA's approvals in the last 9 years for drugs have some personalized medicine component, right? So there's an element of like your actual treatment plan and your care can be personalized. The experience of staying adherent and staying on care plan can be personalized. And then we talked about previously, we can even have a baseline of what is your personal health status and how does that change? Some of those things are going to be better owned by the individual. Some of those things are going to be better driven by, let's say, if not owned by, driven by the care professional. And then there's going to be a murky middle that I think is the opportunity for us all to figure out of who's responsible, who's owning it, how do those things connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously there's a big component here, which is obviously the topic of patient data access. Generally, I mean, this is obviously all these opportunities and benefits that we're discussing are very much dependent on the interoperability of data. And obviously, that is definitely a lot of legacy systems that need to start talking to each other. And obviously that is a pain point that needs to be overcome.
Yeah, and we do see that folks are not always comfortable sharing their data with external stakeholders, be they big tech or even their healthcare provider. And so there is a question around, for for, is it going to be worth it at some level? Does the personalization make it worthwhile to share your data, or is there some federated way where you can own and access your data? The algorithm can work on it, but nobody else owns and accesses it. And I think that's still, again, something to be sorted out.
Yeah, absolutely. Just we did promise that we would just touch on digital twins, right? So yeah. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and so
sure.
What's the role digital twins going to play?
Yeah, digital twins is a pretty fascinating concept. The idea is that you create a replica of a person, but it's digital, and so then you can model different treatment plans, different care plans on that model and determine what might work before you test it all on an individual. And this can be used both for drug discovery, where you can model molecules and other things. It can be used in clinical trials where you can have a synthetic control arm and that makes it easier. And it can be used for actual care plans where you can say, individual X, if we create a digital replica of you and we have all of your health information and your lifestyle information, and we model out what happens with these 3 treatments, now we can determine which one is best before you even take anything or try anything. And this can be used from a behavioral perspective or from a molecular medical perspective. So relatively nascent, but pretty exciting area to sort of take personalization to the next level. And of course, apply AI, as we are talking about, to help get those insights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's and again, from that point of view, there's a huge benefit that it's going to, provide to care providers, and ultimately this is going to drive operation of, better health outcomes at lower cost, right? So that's basically what the end game is for them. But if you can create more optimized care pathways for specific patients through tailored treatment plans, then from a business point of view, it's going to drive efficiencies. So there's huge benefits there as well. We've got 30 seconds left. Richard, I wanted to see if you wanted to pose a question.
Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sari. Please also don't forget we are also running our audience poll. Just as a quick follow-up to the to the question you had, Chris, when do you think one might be able to use digital twins in healthcare realistically?
It's already in play. There are companies already using them. It's sort of niche, so there are companies using it in drug discovery, like I mentioned. There's companies using it in patient care for obesity are the ones I'm already aware of, but I imagine more will come.
Yeah, there's virtual patient data is being used for early stage startups looking at rethinking clinical trials, for example. That's another area that it's being used in.
Excellent. Thank you, Sari, and thank you, Chris, for your participation and great discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're almost there now, and now for the closing part of the event, I would very much like to invite Valeria, who we saw at the beginning, back to the stage.
Hi again. Hi, Richard. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I mean, this has been a fascinating conversation, and so many similarities in terms of what we're thinking is going to happen across the 3 industries. Certainly, a lot of talk about personalization, hyper-personalization, a lot of talk about automation. I think, it would be really interesting to explore how the cross sections of those industries are going to evolve as well. And thank you so much to all of our speakers, and especially our guest speakers, Andrea, Jim, Raj, Sari. Thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise and insights today. Before we conclude, I just want to share a few things that are going to come up in the next month. So please stay tuned for more of our events and insights over May and June. And if you are located in one of our hubs in Munich, Tokyo, in Sunnyvale, Silicon Valley, or in Copenhagen, we're going to be hosting some events at our Star Spaces. And we really hope that you're going to be able to join us for those. In addition to these, we also have a few online events coming up in the next 2 months, where we're going to discuss some of the trends that we have seen today in much more detail, and specifically focusing on the industries that we covered today. So we're going to have an event focused on the finance industry, disrupt or be disrupted, making the leap to digital first banking. In automotive mobility, we were going to cover the future of mobility horizons. How do you design for a changing world? And in particularly focusing on brands, marketing, ad tech's side of things, the creative economy 2.0, what impact is AI going to have on agency compensation and value exchange models? And also on regulatory side, the future of AI management systems and ISO 42001. We hope you're going to be able to join us for some of these. Please keep an eye on our website and also on our social channels to know when these are happening and to be able to attend.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Valeria. Before we conclude, I think we've got time for two very quick questions, if you wouldn't mind. So since the 10Forward report provides insights rather than predictions, can you recommend how we might practically apply these insights in strategic decision making within company organizations?
Yeah, I think it's a very good stimulus, and I would use it as such. So I would recommend that once you have got access in a couple of minutes to 10Forward and you have explored the trends and you have downloaded the PDF, you select some of the trends that you believe are going to be relevant for your industry or for your company, trends that you believe in, and you can run some workshops using our endgame thinking methodology. In fact, we're providing some templates within our PDFs that you can use to that end. And effectively, we could use the trends as a stimulus to start thinking about what would it mean for us? Do we want to develop products or solutions that would allow us to create some of these products for the future? Do we want to make some developments that are going to make sure that we don't end up in some of these scenarios for the future? So really all up to you to have a look at what makes sense for your organization. And then please have a look at the templates that we're providing. There is a very clear methodology that allows us to start with the future and then take into account our operational reality, the speed with which we want to advance, the resources that we have inside our company in terms of people, in terms of monetary resources, etc., in terms of skills and knowledge, and map those journeys. How might we get there? Breaking it down step by step and making, this kind of big task really manageable. So please have a look, discover those templates, and, absolutely get in touch with us if you would like to chat with somebody or have some guidance on how to use them. We'll be very happy to help.
Thank you, Valeria. And also, do you have any plans to create additional worlds or scenarios in future editions of the 10Forward report? Also, are you looking at maybe expanding the coverage to more than just 3 industries moving forward?
It's a good question. I think what we know so far is that we definitely want to make this a yearly report so that every year we're going to release a new version of it. I think we would be very keen to add additional industries to it, particularly from what we have seen whilst creating the report this year. Sustainability, energy resources is all a very important topic that has been a red thread throughout all of the worlds. So we would love to take a much deeper look at that. But also, I think we would love to hear from you in terms of, are there particular industries that you're really interested in hearing about? Do you think there are other industries that are going to be really impacted by the changes that we're seeing now and in the next 10 years? And if so, please also get in touch with us and let us know, because we would love to have your feedback on what you would like to know more on.
Excellent. Thank you. And just before we wrap up, I think, Valeria, you have something to announce, I think, yes?
Well, just in a couple of seconds, you're going to see that 10Forward is going to be live. And I'm very excited to invite all of you to start exploring the future. Please have a look at the pop-up on your screens. There is a link that will take you to the site where you can access all of the 4 worlds, spend time discovering them, download the PDF for more insights, and also the templates and the playbooks. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Richard, for being our guide today. You will also find all of the necessary links in the chat, in the pop-up, and also on our website. So in case you don't get a chance to click on this here, the link to 10Forward is going to be live on star.global.
Thank you, Valeria. I think I'll be heading over there as soon as we wrap up here. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for your time. We hope that you found the event both interesting and engaging, which is always my watchword, has to be interesting. And Star will be very pleased to answer any questions we did not get to and discuss any of these insights with you in the future. And that brings us to the end of our event. Thank you once again for your time, and good afternoon.
Thank you all. See you soon.